I'm Big Don Luca, smoke you like my hookah. Pump fake right, then I step back in illusion. That's a boss move maneuver, billionaire entrepreneur. Mark Cuban on the viewer, put you rookies on a skewer. I stay shitting on you boys like I came up from the sewer. Used to have a lot of dollars, now I got a lot fewer. What you saying to me? I hope you save it for me. I'm about to kill the game, and I put it in my testimony.
Hi, welcome to the Mainstream Mavs podcast. This is your host, Will. I'm joined in person, only fitting for a game like this, by my co-host, Jaren.
What is up, guys?
Today, we are going to be getting into the Mavericks 111-110 victory over the Los Angeles Lakers. Maxi Kleber hitting the game-winning three at the buzzer as Kyrie Irving gets swarmed. He dishes it out to the wing. Maxi releases it with maybe 0.2 seconds left. The Mavericks win. It's their first buzzer beater of the year. Times are jovial and all is well. It was the complete antithesis for Maxi Kleber, a guy who had some severe clutch time woes the other night when the Mavericks played San Antonio, throwing the ball out of bounds, and then on the ensuing play, letting Keldon Johnson get a wide open dunk to tie the game up, and the Mavericks end up going to overtime in that game. He flips the script completely, hits the buzzer beater here. The Mavericks were without Luka. This was a game that they sorely needed, especially as the playoff race ensues. They are now 6 in the standings. Had they lost this, I believe they would have been out of the play-in, if I'm not correct.
I think they would have been a game out of the play-in.
They would have been a game out of the play-in, and the Lakers would have been in the play-in. I mean, this is just a huge stakes game on a Friday night. Jaren, what was your immediate reaction to the game?
I mean, you know, to be clear, like, this was a game from start to finish. Honestly, it was all competition. Both teams played really well, but Maxi, big step up, especially, you know, hitting the last 6 points, having those 3 free throws that, you know, really pushed the game into actually being a game after being 5 points for basically what felt like a long time. But I mean, can we finally say, like, after all of the hardships of this season, it's kind of led up into this moment, and it feels good. You know, we still have 11 games left. Every game's going to matter from here on out, but this team finally gets a break, and a break that's much needed, especially this late in the season.
Yes, and we will be getting all into this game, of course, and Maxi's game winner. But before we do that, here's an ad from our sponsor, Spotify for Podcasters. All right, Jaren, so getting into this one, before, you know, we're going to save the game winner and all of the final plays of the game and just play this one out sequentially from start to finish. So for those of you guys who only listen to the start of our podcast because you just can't bear to hear our voice, this is one where we are unfortunately going to have to apologize to you because you'll have to listen for us to get into all the goods here. But nonetheless, the Mavericks start this game out, and the perimeter defense is lackluster, to say the least, as it has been throughout really this stretch since the All-Star break, where it's really been suffering heavily. What did you see in that first quarter from the Mavericks, and what was your confidence really just throughout that first half in terms of their ability to even provide any sort of stopgap measures to what the Lakers were doing offensively in the way that they sort of ran their offense through Anthony Davis and their guard play, you know, through D'Angelo Russell was just in sync from some really tough shot making.
Yeah, in that first quarter, I would say you could probably tally that one as the worst quarter in terms of defense. It's just really bad perimeter defense. That, of course, leads to collapsing on the paint, and that's exactly what happened. The Lakers got too many easy shots down low, and I want to say early in the first, it was like 12-5 at one point, but basically all of their points had come via inside the paint. And, you know, having Anthony Davis and D'Angelo Russell sort of spearhead your offense, there's just so many things that you can do with that. And that's exactly what they did. They dictated pretty much the whole game with that sort of duo, at least the whole entire first quarter. You know, the Mavericks offense slowly came into progression as that first quarter kind of ticked along, but it kind of came along with the defense. It seemed like, you know, when the Mavericks were really sort of slowed down and weren't really in progression or anything like that, that was kind of when the defense and the offense just felt really blocky in a sense. I guess that's probably the best word to put it, but definitely in that second quarter, things really picked up. I want to say the Mavericks got off to their big run in that second quarter, and I don't believe that they were up by much, maybe like 7 points at the most, but even still big enough gap to, you know, give a comfortable, sizable lead And, you know, as I mentioned before, offense led into defense, and that's exactly what happened. Anthony Davis, he didn't really have the best of games, one where, you know, he was pretty efficient and still had 26 points, but at times just didn't feel like he had his fingerprints in the game. And especially in that second quarter was one of those times. We had to see the second unit kind of get into progression, whether it was, you know, Dennis Smith or Dennis Schroeder and Rui Hachimura. Those were kind of the guys that, you know, in the second quarter for the Lakers kind of had to not carry, but kind of had to put things on their back. And in doing so, the Mavericks really got off to a nice head start. But definitely as that second quarter sort of went along, Lakers found their footing back again. And pretty much from the whole game out, you know, it was a back and forth battle between these two.
Yeah, it definitely seemed as if the Lakers in that first quarter were just doing a really good job in terms of their guard play at the point of attack. The Mavericks had a tough time being able to slow up any penetration. And because of that, the pick and roll definitely ended up kind of opening up seamlessly with Anthony Davis and company. But the Lakers were just also winning a lot of scramble possessions, getting a lot of offensive rebounds, and it was leading to a lot of open looks for them. A team that, you know, notoriously, even despite this past trade deadline, isn't really the best 3-point shooting team, was actually not filling it up. They were getting some wide open looks at times during this game. They only ended up finishing 5 of 20, which is an absolute abomination. But within that first and second quarter, they were actually feeding themselves some decent looks, and they were just doing a good job attacking off of closeouts, off some, you know, Mavericks being kind of preemptive in their pursuit. Austin Reeves, Malik Beasley, these were all guys that were kind of pushing the ante, running in transition, getting to the free throw line. The Lakers ended up shooting 31 free throws on the night, and they only made 19. God bless, because had they just made one more, this would have gone to overtime. Had they made 2 more, they would have won the game. So that is a huge plus in itself. But nonetheless, the Mavericks were able to ready the storm by just doing a better job in terms of their swarming defense, as Jaren kind of alluded to in that second quarter. They did a better job trapping, and especially once the defense sort of would collapse, they did a really good job just replacing and rotating whenever, you know, any guy would help on one side, and there would be a guy to help for whoever's man, you know, he just left. And the Mavericks were doing a really good job of that in the second quarter, especially when they had to swarm Davis throughout different periods. You know, he did fill it up with some tough shots and had a few good offensive rebounds that were able to lead to some kickouts for the Lakers and, you know, his own points. But the Mavericks, you know, by virtue of that 2-center lineup that they played throughout quite a few different stretches of this game, it definitely gave them an increased amount of size to help the rebounding woes a little bit. And by virtue of that, you know, Christian Wood, when he was in there, because that's who they were typically playing as the second big, he was able to kind of freelance and play on guards a little bit more and not really have to worry as much about dropping. And they kind of relegated those to those sort of responsibilities to Maxi and Dwight, who were a little bit more, you know, well suited to do that. And I think that that's a big reason that the Lakers offense started to kind of slow and lull out in the third quarter. They started getting some really tough shot making from D'Angelo Russell. He ended up finishing 5 for 17 on the night, but he filled it up with some shots there in that third period, and he was doing a really good job, you know, distributing at the point of attack. He had a lot of assists in this one. He had 11 assists, and the Mavericks were just kind of having a tough time stopping that, and not even really in any sort of fault to their own. It was more so just some really tough shot making by the Lakers. And there were some unfortunate bounces, I thought, and the Mavericks kind of also probably weren't the benefactors of some calls. The Lakers got a few favorable calls and were out in transition and running. And, you know, there were a few replays for, you know, certain respected things. But nonetheless, they were able to kind of ready the storm until they got to the fourth quarter. And in that fourth quarter, the Mavericks, honestly, throughout most of the period, had a pretty tough time scoring, other than the beginning when Christian Wood was still in there. But, you know, once he subbed out, seeing things kind of started to seemingly stall up a little bit. What do you think happened there? Was it a matter of the fact that, you know, Kyrie, you know, did he have anything to do with the fourth quarter scoring woes? And how were the Mavericks able to remediate it remediated at the end of the game.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this, countless times this season where the fourth quarter kind of slows up this team. They have an amazing third quarter, all the momentum headed in the fourth quarter, and it all just pretty much falls apart. Now this one, they were thankful enough to still be in the game. And of course, Maxi hit the buzzer beater. But I really think that the main reason this kind of game slowed up, Kyrie got into some really early foul trouble early in that fourth quarter. I think that really affected the aggression that the Mavericks could play on offense. They're running basically all of their offense through Kyrie, whether it was, dishing off to Christian Wood down low or whatever it was. And they kind of had to rely a little more on other guys, Josh Green. He didn't really get to play that much up top, but Christian Wood was one guy who really had to, kind of surface his own offense. And I think, McKinley Wright at times, they had to rely on him playmaking in that early in that fourth quarter. I just think it really, the depth of this team, once again, to prove it on a point, it's just kind of slowed up through the fourth quarter. Of course, the Lakers really picked it up. They, I think that they were up by 7 at one point, kind of midway through the fourth quarter. But yeah, Christian Wood, somebody, who kind of needs, I guess, at least throughout this game, he was kind of in a rhythm through the whole game. And honestly, in that fourth quarter is whenever he really slowed up. Defensively, he was still playing pretty good, but offensively is whenever his game started slowing up in that fourth quarter. But I think it was just more so in that fourth quarter, the offense really just couldn't get in the rhythm, really couldn't run anything. And in doing so, I think that's why is because Kyrie kind of got into some early foul trouble. I want to say he had 5 fouls with like 6 minutes to go. And I think that just slowed up a lot of things for the Mavericks. He got that one quick breather. I want to say it was maybe like a total of like 30 seconds in game time. But I mean, it seemed like that was just enough. And the Mavericks pretty much kicked into high gear after that. Majority of that, like last few possessions, they were down by 5 points until Maxi, of course, hit those really clutch 3 free throws in a row. And then, of course, ended up hitting that buzzer beater. But outside of that, I really think that it was slowed up due to the foul trouble that Kyrie got in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it may have just thrown things off kilter a little bit. Kyrie ended up playing 39 minutes in this, game high for both teams, and he played a good margin of that fourth quarter as well. So I think it kind of just maybe threw off the momentum and whatever sort of, direction the Mavericks were trying to kind of go in as, that fourth quarter kind of went and tagged along. But nonetheless, on the other side of things, they definitely, diverted back to some of that first quarter defense where we saw guys like Schroeder and D'Angelo Russell, really beating Maverick defenders at the point of attack, whether it be Josh Green or Reggie Bullock, some of the Mavericks better defenders who I thought honestly kind of changed the narrative comparatively to what they've kind of been doing recently on defense throughout this recent stretch. Even some of the Mavericks better defenders have definitely suffered from a team perspective, but those second and third quarters were some of the best defense the Mavericks had played, just from a ability to scramble and rotate, as I had kind of alluded to earlier. But I think a little of that went away in the fourth quarter, and I don't know exactly what to attribute that to. I don't know if the Mavericks were just less spirited because they were having some offensive woes that were persisting, or what exactly it was. I mean, we've seen that at times throughout this year, and it's something that this team essentially always says they're going to fix, but they just never necessarily do. So I don't know exactly what it was, but those defensive issues start to persist. Anthony Davis kind of seemed almost like the elephant in the room at times. He just, the Mavericks seemingly, as the game kept evolving, he just seemed more like insurmountable and unfair of a player to be able to try and guard, which was a really interesting complex. I mean, they did a better job in the second and third quarter of trapping him when he get into the paint, and then, making him take it out. And the Mavericks did a really good job of consolidating and rotating and replacing, but they were kind of just letting him get to his spots there in that fourth quarter. And, whether that meant him taking a shot or him being able to, then comfortably dish it to somebody off of a late double, it started to eat up towards the Mavericks. But luckily, obviously, all those woes were remediated with those final few possessions of the game and some really clutch Kyrie shot making. We have to get into him as well. He had a ton of fourth quarter points. He was virtually the Mavericks' only source of offense within that fourth quarter, as the role players definitely stalled out comparable to what they had done previously in the game, where they, while Kyrie definitely seemed like he was the genesis and the Mavericks offense ran through him at all, through all times in this game, which was definitely a sight to see, especially since we haven't seen a Kyrie Luka-less game since his first few games here, where I think a lot of fans probably would have denoted him to be a little bit more passive than not. But I think that any of those concerns have been quickly flushed away ever since after the All-Star break and everything like that. But it was interesting to see, and it was interesting, I think, how a lot of us thought going into this game how he was going to respond. I mean, 38 big points with just some huge shot making from all three levels. We'll get into the full dichotomy of his game here in a second, but he was really the only thing keeping the Mavericks alive throughout stretches in that fourth quarter. When role players just weren't making shots, they were having some sort of just lackadaisical turnovers, just non-attentive turnovers. It was like, I can't remember if it was late in the third or in the fourth, but I remember at one point, I think it was like, I don't know how I'm bluffing on who exactly it was, but I think it was like either McKinley Wright or Tim Hardaway just like virtually like gave the ball to one of the Lakers at one point. It might have even been Christian Wood, but they just lost the ball at the top of the key. There was, stuff like that going on. The Mavericks ended up having 13 turnovers, not anything groundbreaking or anything like that, but they did have a lot more costly slippages in that third and fourth quarter. And, Kyrie really kept them in the game, Jaren. So let's go ahead and get into the final possessions, because I know that's what everybody's been waiting for. They don't want to listen to me talk about all this irrelevant stuff here. But obviously, as Jaren kind of alluded to, the Mavericks were down 7 at one point late in the third quarter, and they end up, remediating that. It's this really big back and forth game where they're down by like 5 or 6 at points. We'll fast forward to with 3 minutes and 39 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Kyrie Irving makes that really tough giant killer. I believe it was over AD. It was, yeah. And at that point, Kyrie then gets the quick breather, as Jaren had alluded to. This makes the game 102-105. And, we're going through this because it's significant in the fact that the Mavericks won a clutch game in the manner that they did. Sure, they won the Spurs game the other night, overtime, yada, yada, yada. But, I mean, this is an actual, real clutch game winner in a high-stakes game. And this is something that we've seldomly seen this team have the balls to do all season. But nonetheless, in the ensuing possession, after Josh Green substitutes for Kyrie, Anthony Davis makes a jump shot, extends the Laker lead to 5. The Mavericks then take that timeout, and Kyrie comes back in for Josh Green at that point because his breather in actual game time was only about 23 seconds because they staggered it with the timeout. But nonetheless, Maxi Kleber ends up getting fouled. I believe he attacked off a closeout, and it seemed as if younger Maxi would have been able to throw it down, but he kind of like did a little double clutch thing and barely got the ball up. But nonetheless, he goes 1 for 2 on the free throw line. He was fouled by D'Angelo Russell. He at this point scores 103-107 with 2:48 left. Then D'Angelo Russell misses a mid-range jump shot the next play. Wenyen Gabriel gets the offensive rebound. But as the Mavericks, there were a lot of points in this game where we talked about the Mavericks scramble defense really coming through. Tim Hardaway Jr. Gets an errant pass from Wenyen Gabriel. He's able to kind of deflect it, and he gets out in transition, and he's wide open. And Tim Hardaway Jr. fashion, with about 21 seconds left in the shot clock, he shoots a 3, misses it. Austin Reeves gets the rebound. On the other end, Schroeder misses a 17-foot pull-up jump shot that was pretty wide open. The Mavericks were fairly fortunate that he missed on that one. And the Hardaway Jr. gets, at least I think that was a Schroeder jump shot that was fairly wide open, because there were a couple. The Mavericks did bear some very fortunate not shot making by the Lakers in this game at times, because, I alluded to the scramble defense being good, but there were some times where the Lakers would set screens very low on some of their possessions, and the Mavericks went under on them and nobody rotated up top. And it just led to some wide open Laker threes. Anthony Davis is a really good, just in terms of the placement of where he sets his screens. And that was something I was really able to pick up on in this game. But nonetheless, the Mavericks get the rebound off the Schroeder jump shot. And Wenyen Gabriel on the ensuing possession ends up fouling Kyrie Irving. And
That's whenever the Lakers challenge.
Oh, that's right. And then the Lakers challenge, and the challenge was unsuccessful. I mean, there's credence to the fact that Gabriel may have went straight up. I think that there was still some lower body contact that kind of was able to facilitate that call going in the Mavericks' favor, but it's just really long review, kind of takes any of the flow or momentum out of the game away. And then at that point, it's 105-107. The Mavericks are down still, but only by 2 points with 1 minute, 55 seconds left. Next, more D'Angelo Russell ISO ball. He misses a 25-foot three-pointer. Kyrie gets the rebound. Tim Hardaway Jr.
Classic. It was like corner. I think it was a corner.
Yeah, this was a corner three. He was kind of put in a bad position. A pretty obstructive view on the left baseline where he had to kind of chuck up a corner three, but nonetheless, you would have liked to see him maybe try and kick the ball back out. Schroeder gets the rebound. Anthony Davis misses a step back jump shot. Lakers get an offensive rebound. Tim Hardaway Jr. ends up fouling them, and he fouls Austin Reeves in the corner, who then makes 2 out of 2 free throws after having a sort of rough free throw shooting game up until that point. That extends the Laker lead to 4. After that, with about 38 seconds left, Christian Wood loses the ball. D'Angelo Russell gets a steal on the ensuing Mavericks offensive possession. And at that point, the game almost kind of seems virtually over. The Lakers wait out the whole clock, essentially. D'Angelo Russell misses a 3 with about 17 seconds left. Kyrie Irving gets the defensive rebound. And then the Mavericks go down the floor. They don't take a timeout or anything. They just go straight down the floor. And Kyrie dribbles up the floor. He kicks it to Maxi at the top of the key, who's acting as the trail man in this. And Anthony Davis just stupidly fouls him, like just seemingly
bulldozed into him.
Bulldozed into him. Maxi, after all the sort of late game antics that we referred to in that Spurs game, and we were ever depressed by the other night, makes 3 out of 3 big free throws, cutting the lead to just 1 after the Mavericks seemed as if they had no chance. If the Lakers had even just got to the free throw line or made a basket on the possession before that, this one's over. It's a 2-possession game. It still was, but it could be a 1-possession game if the Mavericks make it 3. Then Jared Vanderbilt comes in for D'Angelo Russell. The Lakers make some rebounding and defensive substitutions right before the Maxi's 3rd free throw. But of course he makes it. Lakers take a timeout. They make more situational substitutions. Mavericks do so as well. They put Tim Hardaway Jr. in for defense, which is always a funny one anytime we see that. But nonetheless, the Josh Green is in the game. The Mavericks do a really good job covering the Lakers up. Anthony Davis flashes to the top of the key. Josh Green is able to foul him just about right away. It took almost didn't even take a second.
Yeah.
It took 0.9 seconds off the clock. Anthony Davis misses the first free throw, goes back iron. Shockingly, makes the second free throw. Lakers then end up, making some situational substitutions again. Mavericks take a timeout, and there's 6.1 seconds left. Mavericks are only down 2 because of the Anthony Davis missed free throw. And at that point, more situational substitutions. The Mavericks try and inbound the ball with about 6.1 seconds left. They put in Theo Pinson as the inbound passer. I don't know why Jason Kidd has basically proclaimed him the best inbound passer on the team, if they have like some sort of practice tape to go off of or what. Or if Theo Pinson is just a self-proclaimed, best inbound passer on the team and was pining for Jason Kidd to put him in. But I don't know exactly what the case was, but he can't find anybody within the first 6.1 seconds, and not even really to his fault or anything like that. Just really nobody could get open. The Mavericks were running a lot of sort of misdirection stuff. A couple down screens for some different guys to try to get open. Just Lakers did a really good job sticking to it. The screens really weren't set hard enough, and they have to call a timeout. Then the Mavericks, of course, come out of the timeout as their final timeout. They run essentially the same action, but Kyrie flashes at the very last seconds, able to get the ball. He gets it, goes to the top of the key, makes a hard move to the right wing, and he gets trapped at the last second. You're thinking that he has to force a shot up. There's just seemingly no time left. I don't even think it was necessarily a play. I think it was a broken play.
It was a broken play.
Yeah.
And the Mavericks got extremely lucky that, Anthony Davis kind of had a flash down in the middle because, I mean, at that point, you have to expect.
Just the threat of the Kyrie.
Yeah, exactly. You have to expect Kyrie to at least bring the ball back inside. But, of course, in doing so, he kicked it out and Maxi made that incredible 3-point shot that at time, like, I don't know, if you didn't see the replay, like, you honestly wouldn't think that it went in on time. But I think he released it with like 0.2.
Yeah, I was questioning at the time, but me and Jaren were watching the game together. We were going crazy. It was a party at the mainstream Mavs house, and nonetheless, times were jovial, as I said at the beginning of the podcast. And the whole team swarms Maxi. It's just a great scene, something that the Mavericks sorely needed. Obviously, we just spent, we talked ad nauseum about the actual, waning moments leading up to that and how the Mavericks, yes, they did bear a lot of luck and some negative regression in terms of some of the Lakers shooting in this one, even for the Lakers, I would say it was negative regression, a team that's not too good at shooting, but there is something to the effect that they had to really grow a pair and bring this one home. And it's something that we haven't seen from this team virtually all season. And there still probably wasn't even the best play drawn up in clutch time, but they were able to bring it home. It was, I think, their first buzzer beater of the season.
I believe so.
Yeah, because even the Luka tie
with the Lakers and Clippers.
Yeah, but I was gonna say the Luka tie tip in against the Knicks still had time left on the clock. That's the only one I can remember off the top of my head.
One, yeah.
So, Jaren, what was your immediate reaction? Just in terms of how this bodes in the future for the Mavericks from the playoff perspective and the seeding perspective, because before we get into some of the individual performances of everybody in this one, just a hugely significant event for this to happen in the game 71 of the season, where the Mavericks are at 500 going into this game, sort of jockeying in playoff position with a Lakers team. And we didn't know who exactly was going to play before the game. It got announced that Tim Hardaway Jr. and Kyrie would play after there was some sort of uncertainty persisting as to in regards to their playing status. And, Luka didn't play. Obviously, LeBron's out. He's been out ever since he had that ankle injury in Dallas, as a matter of fact, a few weeks ago. So what was your just reaction to how all this fared out, and how good does it feel to get a win over a Lakers team?
Yeah, I mean, it's about time that this Mavericks team got something going their way. Especially something of this fashion where it was a clutch time win, and a clutch time win where, you're down by 5 with, I think, like 6 seconds left or 7 seconds left, and you come back and you win the game, of course. This was one, I want to say at the beginning of the day, the Mavericks were sitting in the 8th and 7th spot. And very realistically, if they lost this game, they could finish in the 10th spot. We could be having a very different conversation at this time. But of course, nonetheless,
they would just barely be in the play-in. So we messed it up at the beginning of the pod. They would be in the last seed of the play-in with the Lakers ahead of them and the Thunder ahead of them, as well as the Warriors and the Minnesota Timberwolves. So, this is a 4-seed difference. Yeah. Because of one Maxi Kleber 3-pointer.
Yeah, exactly. And very timely, to say the least. But of course, the Mavericks sitting right now at, 2:25 a.m. On March 18th, I believe. The Mavericks are sitting in the 6th spot, a game and a half behind the Clippers in the 5th seed, where the Clippers are playing tomorrow against Orlando. I think it's a matinee game, but outside of that, I don't think there's really much you can say, but other than an amazing, huge win, very timely,
even though he didn't play.
He didn't. Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, you didn't get to see Luka, but especially for a guy like Maxi to hit this shot, one where, of course, he's been out majority of the season and had that very rough into the San Antonio game. I think it was more of the
epitome of redemption.
Yeah, this is like, you can quote this, you can write this down in the history books as the redemption shot. And realistically, like, this is something this Mavericks team could build off of. I don't
want to go like too big picture here. I hate to interrupt you, but
no, it's okay.
This is like, in a sense, like, this is, I wouldn't say, this is kind of stretching it, but it's like almost emblematic of like a kind of a career saving shot for Maxi. Not just from, like, I guess the aura surrounding, him, because imagine if he doesn't hit that shot, you still have the bad taste in your mouth from the other night. who knows what happens with the Mavericks as they go down the stretch. And I mean, they're still very much in jeopardy of technically not making the playoffs. I'm not discounting that. But this could potentially be like a very like career defining pivotal moment as he goes forward. I mean, who knows how he's viewed as from a player perspective going into next season. If, the last sort of taste you have in your mouth is the Mavericks missing the playoffs. And I'm not saying and who knows how the last 11 games of the season fare. That's obviously, taking it a step further, trying to predict the future and everything. I don't know how things going to turn out, but I mean, just quite possibly the most pivotal moment of his career up until this point in terms of how it could bode for him in the future, and definitely of this Mavericks season.
No, I mean, to say that's putting it lightly. That was actually, you said that very well. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Maxi's career, this was a very timely 3, and especially for the Mavericks, with that loss, or assuming they lost, like they would be sitting at best in the 9th seed and at worst, of course, in that 10th seed. You have to think about possibly, do you deactivate all your players at that time? But, this win elevates them into another seeding, one where, at the moment, you're not worried about the play-in. You still have that in the back of your mind, but let's say you go on a little bit of a run here.
I mean, just the momentum aspect.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Like,
I don't know if they would deactivate all their players, because I think that there's
you can't. Like, it's
but I mean, those thoughts are going to emanate within the media and the fan base,
and it's gonna sour the season, of course. But this win puts such a good taste in your mouth to where there's really nothing you can do but build off of this.
And it was sorely needed, because even that Spurs win, it wasn't it didn't mend any of the wound, I thought, in my opinion. Yes, it boded well in terms of the Mavericks just in getting another win in the win-loss column and helping, forward their case in terms of, jockeying with playoff position and everything. But the way that game ended and, how they very just barely were able to squeak past a very weak and brittle, depleted Spurs front court and Spurs back court, for that matter, who, as bad as they are, had like a lot of their best players out. It just didn't leave you with the best taste in your mouth. And I mean, especially with the way Kyrie played down the stretch in this one, it just gives you a little more hope that, it's like, okay, like maybe the doom and gloom that we've sort of clung to these last couple of games, we can attribute some of it to the fact that our 2 best players aren't there. I think that there's something to the effect of that, obviously. And, I don't want to say that the fan base overreacted in a sense, because things could definitely still go haywire. But, I think things were getting very dark and grim on the Twitter timeline. And, this is not a cure-all by any means, but I think this is definitely a sort of a pullback into reality that, maybe this team still has a lot of uncertainty surrounding it, and it's definitely got a lot of fatal flaws, but they aren't a complete dumpster fire. I think that's a good way to put it.
No, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, this team, again, you can build off this. I don't mean to be like this or try and, compare this to anything, but you can sort of attribute this win, assuming the Mavericks go on a run, assuming the Mavericks, somehow gain a 5 spot or a 6 spot even in the playoffs, you can attribute this win to that sort of kickstarting the season, or however you want to look at it. Because, I mean, amazing win, of course, one where, everything leading up to this was going to prove all the doubters correct. And, to go into their building, of course, and nail down such a huge shot like that, especially for Maxi Kleber, that's just incredible. Of course, we would be having a completely different conversation if he had missed it or if it came off his fingertips 0.2 seconds later. But we are lucky enough to be having this conversation, and we're lucky enough to be talking about the future in sort of a bright way. And that's something that we haven't been able to do very much of on this podcast, at least for this season. And, let's hope that changes. Let's hope, we continue to have these conversations. But this is one where, I want to ride this win out. We don't play till Monday. So let's attribute some sort of, celebratory measures, I should say, to Maxi Kleber and especially the Mavericks.
Yes, it was if you guys have any German beers on tap, definitely enjoy them, because it's a winding Würzburg victory in this one. I don't know where I was going with that, but I tried. Nonetheless, though, let's go ahead and get into the individual performers in this game because, we've obviously covered this one sequentially and talked about the significance that this has for this Mavericks team as they continue down the stretch here in this regular season. I think that kind of goes without saying, but, let's starting off with Kyrie, as I kind of alluded to, just offensively as the main catalyst and source of all things Mavs. Shout out to all things Mavs on Twitter. If he ever listened to the podcast, I doubt he ever has or ever will, but, Kyrie was the genesis of basically all things Mavs in terms of their offense in this one, Jaren. And how do you think he was able to create looks for himself and others and some of the actions that the Mavericks ran for him? It was a little tougher for them to use him off ball in this one, given that Luka wasn't out there, but they still ran a few things with him and Christian Wood I thought were really interesting. We just really, like I kind of said, or alluded to it at first, saw the full dichotomy of his offense in this one, as we have in a couple other ones. This was his second highest scoring game as a Maverick with 38 points, only topped by his 40-point performance against Philadelphia. What did we see from him in this one that made him so effective?
Yeah, I mean, can we say perfect scoring from all three levels? An efficient 5 for 9 from the 3-point line and an efficient 14 from 23 from the field. One where, he was able to attack the basket just so cleanly, so effortlessly. He was able to put multiple sort of, fade away, even a 3-point shot over Anthony Davis. One where, it was pretty much just in his eyes. There was no thought, no doubt in Kyrie's eyes as to, that he was going to miss this shot. But, the sort of 3-level scoring aspect that this guy can bring, you give a little screen with Dwight Powell to top the key and you can snake pretty much all 3 defenders who are going to come up and help on that. And that's exactly what we saw. We saw him do the classic snaking the pick and rolls, snaking the defenders, getting around the key and, basically beautifully tapping it in, getting his classic finger rolls, dancing. I'm trying to use like every adjective that I can right now to describe this guy's game, because this was quite literally, perfect. And you can underline that like 3 different times. What he was able to do with the ball tonight was just so masterful. And, I don't know, this is one of his all-time classic games. I feel like, again, I haven't seen very many Kyrie, Brooklyn games, but nonetheless, now that I'm getting to watch this full screen, it's beautiful to watch. But him being just the main catalyst and the main spearhead of the Mavericks offense really, entails what this game was about. Having, of course, 38 points. He didn't really have to distribute the ball all too much. He did do that, and mainly to Christian Wood. But again, as I said, he didn't have to really be a move ball. A ball mover. Yes, he didn't really have to be a ball mover in this game. Really being able to establish his own offense was exactly what he did. And as I mentioned, 5 seconds ago, it was just beautiful to watch. And even defensively, from a team aspect, he played really good. Nothing showed up on the stats, of course, but I felt like as a team player, he played really good on defense. I didn't feel like he had any, egregious late, closeouts.
Even really good rotationally.
Yeah, amazing rotationally. Yeah, he had some amazing deflections that led to some steals for the Mavericks. But and even, just from an individual aspect, we saw Reggie get blown by sometimes or even beat off cuts, just not paying attention. Even Josh, for that matter, just got beat off of those sort of plays. But I don't think we ever saw that from Kyrie Irving. Now, granted, he was sort of guarding, D'Angelo Russell, and he was switched onto some, lesser offensive players at time. But still, I think that Kyrie, if you want to label this as perfect, you can probably do so, because this is probably one of his best games he's played as a Maverick. I mean, I don't know if this one was better than Philadelphia, but this one was for sure his second best game. But yeah, I think, there's 0 words to describe Kyrie Irving's game in this one, but it was definitely fun to watch. I'll say that.
Yeah. I mean, he just has the inherent ability to be able to, stay savvy and control his body like no other at any juncture of the game. And I mean, he did a great job of that, whether they were running him off DHOs and he was just shooting it at the top of the key, really setting the pace in transition. He knows exactly when to speed it up, exactly when to slow down, as Jaren alluded to, with his ability to just really be masterful in the pick and roll, know exactly, when to make that feed and when to take it himself, and just some of the clutch shot making he had. I mean, it was really unrivaled and just uncanny, and his ability to really, take heat and, carry the Mavericks over the finish line and just so unfazed. There's not really even a moment where you ever see him look, visually rattled or anything like that. He's always so poised, as Christian Wood said the other day in the interview. I'll keep bringing it up. Kyrie's always so poised, man. And he operated in that manner in this game. And it was a sight to see. A great 38 points from him. The Mavericks don't even come close to sniffing this one out without his contributions in this game. Let's talk about some of the role players for the Mavericks. What did you think from Josh Green this game? And, definitely a little bit more of a quiet 9 points. He didn't fill it up the most. I thought the defense was a little bit better today, particularly in that second, third quarter. He was definitely a cog in terms of the guys that were really contributing to that swarming team defense that we alluded to. But he did still have some individual woes at times. But, he didn't really necessarily take as much of the offensive sort of shot diet that he had in the previous 2 games, of course, with Kyrie out. But he still pushed the pace in transition. There were a few times that he was able to catch guys off guard by blowing past them. What did you see from him today overall in his game?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Green, I felt like did a masterful job attacking the paint. That was really his only way to attribute offensively. He was the classic benefactor of, just some easy playmaking, getting some offensive run through him. But really his, established points were honestly all through the paint, just attacking off of closeouts, the usual thing that we see out of him. He put up some really tough shots, ones that I think he had an and 1-2 that was just really tough. But, that was really, I think, the main part of his game that really honestly kind of elevated him into a level where, yes, it was quiet, but he had some really tough shots, which I believe all were inside the paint. He went 0 for 3 from the 3-point line in this man. But even defensively, I felt like he was, yes, at times he was kind of, not a black hole by any means, but at times it was noticeable, just from an individual effort. I felt like, he was sort of beat off of bad closeouts. Even, as I mentioned earlier, he was caught sleeping one time. I think it was a Jared Vanderbilt easy. Just
there were like 2 cuts that he was caught sleeping on.
I think it was Jared Vanderbilt and maybe Mikhail or
Troy
Beasley
Brown Jr. Maybe.
Yeah, it was Troy Brown. That's exactly what it was. By the way, they look the exact same. But anyways,
yeah, they do look very similar.
But yeah, I think outside of that, Josh Green had a very sound game, especially from a team defensive aspect in those quarters that the Mavericks were really on their run. I felt like he was really the main catalyst of the defensive side of things.
Yeah, and I mean, even though he didn't play throughout certain stretches in this game, late in the game, he still definitely was a huge contributor in this one. What did you think of Dwight Powell today? Obviously, the Mavericks opted to go to Christian Wood for 34 minutes. We saw Jason Kidd trust him down the stretch, and Christian Wood actually ended up having a really good defensive game, at least box score wise. The anti-Wooders, I guess, could debate. He did have a sort of rough stretch when he first entered the game individually, but I thought by virtue of his team defense, he was able to sort of swing the tide on that end. But contrastly to him, Dwight Powell, who started the game, of course, I thought, what did you think from him? How he defended Anthony Davis throughout stretches in this game, and particularly how he was able to play as the role man for the Mavericks when they opted to go to him in those pick and roll scenarios, and they ran staggers and stuff with Kyrie and all that stuff.
I think one thing that's underrated about Dwight Powell's game tonight was, he was really the main pick and roll guy, and that kind of sparked Kyrie Irving's 38 points. Now, Dwight didn't, stuff.
We say this every game, by the way.
Yeah, like he's the guy that, he won't put it on the stat sheet, but he has an impact in a certain ways. Now, I'm not saying he had, a great game by any means or anything like that, but he found his fingerprint, I guess. He got his fingerprint in the game in very Dwight Powell-esque ways. Defensively, late to closeouts, late to jumpers, caught kind of playing a little too low on drop coverage. The usual Dwight Powell things, but gave good effort. Had some nice rebounding moments. Only finished with 4, but he had some nice.
They were all offensive rebounds.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, exactly. He had some nice offensive rebounds. And even offensively, he was the benefactor of some nice pick and roll moments. I think Kyrie and Josh were both assisted on Dwight Powell pick and rolls. But outside of that, I don't think there was anything pretty.
It wasn't even like a game. I thought the Lakers were really timely with some of their traps in this one, and they kind of prevented. They trapped Kyrie at the point of attack a few times, but they were able to kind of prevent him from getting the ball to Dwight, and for Dwight to be that cog in the middle of the floor at the nail, who's able to kind of facilitate in the 4-on-3. So he didn't have the biggest role in this one, but I thought he played as good as he could have defensively in this one, and in those 2-man lineups with Christian Wood, it really didn't seem as if there was too much of a fall off from that to Christian Wood and Maxi, even though I would definitely say that the Christian Wood Maxi lineups were better. And, the Mavericks did play Maxi and Dwight sparingly together, which was a really interesting sort of fit. It's the same sort of effect with Christian Wood, where you can kind of have Maxi as the 5 on offense, but it kind of seemed a little logjam-ish in the front court defensively at times, but nonetheless, I didn't think it was a huge issue, particularly with the Lakers, not having LeBron there, just not putting as much pressure on the rim, and Jared Vanderbilt just not having as huge an effect. The Mavericks kept him off the glass a lot better in this game. He only had 4 rebounds, but nonetheless, it was a concerted team effort from all parties involved to, kind of keep everybody off the glass. The Mavericks only finished with 35 rebounds, Lakers 42, but it didn't seem like as if those 7 rebounds even had a marginal effect on the outcome of this game. The Mavericks just did a really good job of team rebounding and trying to win those 50-50 balls, which is something that we admittedly have not seen throughout stretches in this season. What did you think of, we'll get to the last guy in the starting lineup. What did you think of how Reggie Bullock fared in this one, Jaren? I don't have a ton of thoughts, but I think that he played his role pretty well.
Yeah, I guess that's honestly the best way to put it, is he played his role really well. Reggie definitely got off to a really hot start. I want to say he had 6 of the first 10 points that the Mavericks had. All benefactors of just sort of kick out threes, the usual stuff that we see out of him. He even had a bailout 3. I want to say it was in that late 4th quarter, maybe. It was just like Kyrie kick out.
And then his other 2 were in the first quarter.
Yeah. But defensively, I felt like he played pretty sound team defense. It was just he was caught ball watching at times. Jared Vanderbilt, I think Josh Green and him on that starting lineup in particular, they were caught ball watching at times.
It's weird because they followed the trend of the game, and when the Mavericks team defense was better, they looked better. But when the team defense was a little more lackluster, their individual defense kind of waned as well, and they were kind of getting blown by and letting guys get to their spots a little bit easier. I refer to one play at the end of the 4th quarter, kind of where D'Angelo Russell, I don't know if you know the term crabbing, but it's essentially when you get a defender on the backside of your hip, typically in a pick and roll, when a defender goes over and you get them, they get caught lacking and you're able to just get them on the backside of the hip. You'll see Luka do it a lot, and he was able to do that. And on Reggie Bullock one time, D'Angelo Russell, that is, and, get him to where Reggie couldn't even contest a shot. And there were just a few possessions like that where you would have liked to see a little bit more effort, but nonetheless, the defense and the 3-point shooting has been great as of recently. And I'm not going to complain about a 3 for 5 night. It was, pretty decent defense throughout most stretches of this game. So nonetheless, let's go ahead and segue to the bench. Tim Hardaway Jr. coming back from that injury that he had. It's slipping my mind exactly what it was.
Was it another right foot injury?
Yeah, it was like another right foot thing. Yeah. But nonetheless, he was able to come back in this one, surprisingly enough. Only played 27 minutes. Didn't start the game, but he still, he contributed throughout stretches in this one. What do you think the Mavericks got from him? We saw a little bit of a negative regression from him in terms of his shooting in this one after not having played for a few days, but he was shooting really well before this. So, I personally give him a free pass, especially since he wasn't taking bad shots. A lot of them were open looks. Maybe they were ill-timed in terms of how, early they were in the shot clock or things like that. But I think he just kind of missed a lot of open looks in this one. The defense, I thought he played great team defense and terrible man-on-man and, rotational defense.
Yeah, I think that's, honestly, there's
really he stood in his right spots, but when I say rotational, I don't mean in terms of the scramble defense necessarily. But I just don't think that when he was, making his own individual rotations or having to like switch on guys and stuff like that. Like he was getting lost a few times, and his inability to just have good anticipation skills or flip his hips definitely got to him a lot one-on-one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much tallied it best. Like Tim Hardaway, at moments felt like he was back, but I think this is for sure his first game back.
Yeah.
But yeah, at moments, it felt like Tim Hardaway is back, and at moments it just, he's just kind of a cog on the floor at times. But I don't think anything, took away from the game, momentum wise or anything like that. Like I think he played his role really well off the bench. And, as you said, rotationally did as good as he can, team defensive wise and, man on man wise, it's classic Tim Hardaway defense. Like I think offensively, as you said, there were some ill-timed shots, some shots where you definitely could have moved the ball a little more or you could have passed it up.
But they weren't bad shots.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they were open.
Yeah, they were open, and you expect Tim Hardaway to take those shots. Like that's why he's on the contract that he is right now.
He came in that first three that he not made from like 30 feet or whatever it was. The second he got in the game coming off of injury, it was a good tone setter. And I was overall, he went 4 for 12 tonight, but I don't come away from the game with a sour taste. Maybe it's just because we won.
I mean, I think that definitely probably improves it, but even still, I don't think it was a bad Tim Hardaway game. This is one of his better, if you want to call it a worse game or a bad game, this was his better bad game. I don't know how else to put it, but I liked what he did tonight. I think he brought a good energy off the bench and 27 minutes of action, but a lackluster shooting or at least a deficit in shooting, but I still think Tim Hardaway did what he could and, had his impacts whenever he was on the floor.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. What did you think of how McKinley Wright played in limited minutes? Because the Mavericks went to him a little bit in that first half, and they kind of split the duties of that tertiary playmaking between him and Hardy. Both of them only had a combined 13 minutes together, but I guess you can kind of just bounce off how you thought both of them played in this one. But what did we see from them tonight? I think that their role was very marginable, but when they were in there, I thought both of them played fairly well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to more highlight McKinley Wright in this situation, but I feel like McKinley Wright honestly proved why he's an NBA player, or at least why he's deserving of a contract, next year. He put a good 7 minutes.
Well, not specifically through this game.
Not specifically through this game, but he had moments where it was like, okay, like this guy, you can tell he's improving. You can tell, this second year is definitely way better.
If you watch some of his G League games, it almost just seems as if like
he almost looks like a veteran.
It's like you just want to. It's like a comfortability aspect for him in the NBA. Can he, still do the things? I mean, I know it's different competition, playing field, all that sort of stuff, but he has some like really uber talented games in terms of his ability to create space and get to the rim in the G League. And it almost just seems as if like, smaller guy, 5'11", like, do I have the confidence to be able to make these sort of plays at an NBA level? I think that's like a lot of, where some of the hesitancy that we see in his game comes sometimes. But I think he's just getting better at being aggressive game by game. When he gets a shot, he's still stout as a perimeter defender, which is something this team needs. I mean, guys can shoot over the top of him and he may get beat size-wise sometimes, but he moves well laterally. He shot 2 threes tonight when guys went under on screens on him. He made one of them and the other one went in and out. And then I believe the other shot he had was like, is it like a floater in the pick and roll or something?
I think he had maybe 2 floaters.
One of them bounced out, but I mean, he just played real savvy minutes. I mean, it was only 7 minutes, but it was minutes that the Mavericks needed from him. And I'm happy that he came in and ran the offense for a little bit. And he honestly kind of gels seamlessly with whatever other guards on the floor. He's never a guy that like you look at when he's playing out there and it's like, oh, that's a black hole.
He never sticks out like a sore thumb. Like he's always, playing his role as best as he can. Like at times, you feel that, but at times I'd never really even felt it through this game. Like this game, I thought he played his role really well. I thought he honestly played more than 7 minutes. I think his minutes were cut a little short because he had that weird contact issue.
Oh, that's right. That's why Hardy came in.
Yeah. And I think that's why we saw Hardy minutes. But even still, I felt like McKinley Wright put a good 7 minutes into this game. And like I said, I felt like he got more minutes than that. But even still, in terms of Hardy, it was a classic Jaden Hardy game, one where he pretty much comes out the gates, shoots 2 shots, and we don't really see much of him after that. He still clocked 6 minutes in this one and he had that one, I don't know how you like word this, but he had that one cool action with Kyrie, where like you'd be better describing this. The one where it was like a double screen.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the Mavericks have obviously been running like a lot of like re-screen actions lately.
I see it more between Hardy and Kyrie Irving. I guess that's my
Well,
point.
they do a lot of it with like guards, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that in these two big lineups we've seen with the two bigs that they've ran, where a lot of the time, I don't know exactly the play that you're alluding to, but either the Mavericks will have one guy set a screen where then he flares out to the other wing, and then he'll end up re-screening at some point after the Maverick, lead ball handler, typically like Kyrie or Luka, will use that first screen. Then he'll, the other guy will kind of swing back over and he'll use that other screen as he comes back over, or they'll just run like a stagger, which is just two guys screening, essentially a double screen. Kyrie will come off that, and then one guy will flip his hips if they're not able to create enough space off that, or they just want to create a favorable switch, and they'll use another screen at that. So the Mavericks did that a few times in this game. I didn't even talk about this with Kyrie, but they did some creative things, I thought, in terms of the ability to get him open at times, where they were running just some down screens, and he was able to get backdoor where Christian Wood got him the ball. They did some different creative things on offense tonight, but nothing really too out of the ordinary for what we typically see within their offense. A lot of horn sets. We saw a few zoom actions, a lot of a lot of staggers and then re-screens out of them, a lot of just regular DHOs and then re-screens out of them. And, that's the sort of stuff that you're going to see with Kyrie. You're not going to see, of course, when Luka's here, that, that you get the full arsenal of your playbook that's able to be opened up a little bit more with some of the post ups and the things you can do out of that. The Mavericks just have a lot more actions they can run. But in terms of, these non-Luka games and, this Kyrie only games, I think we kind of saw the full toolbox kind of thrown out there for what the Mavericks have been typically running. I mean, you'd like to see maybe a few more Kyrie direct Christian Wood actions out there, but it does get a little log jammed when you do run as many two big lineups to cover up Wood's defensive deficiencies. So I was completely okay with Wood freelancing on offense a little bit, trying to create things for himself, particularly if it's on like a guy like Wenyen Gabriel. It's not like AD was defending him most of the time. He made a few threes. We'll get to Christian Wood in a second in his offensive game, but Mavericks ran a lot of good plays tonight. All right, there were times I definitely thought that the offense was lacking an agenda in terms of the play calling. It definitely looked a lot more just take the ball and go type of deal that we've seen Jason Kidd do at multiple coaching stops. But as the game sort of went along, it seemed as if they were able to settle into their offense more as the game went along.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of want to highlight these two. I guess we can kind of tally them together. What do you think of Bertans and what do you think of Holiday? Definitely Holiday had more of a defensive stamp on this game, one where, offensively didn't really have a whole lot of actions, or even corner threes, which is what we usually see out of him. We didn't see any of that out of him. And then Bertans doing, what Bertans does best, and, sort of coming off such a speedy, whatever it is, he just has that amazing sort of 3-point aspect that he can shoot the ball very quickly. And even defensively, I thought Bertans, team defensively wise, I think that's something that doesn't really get talked about enough, at least, through this little stretch that he's gotten some clock. Like, he really has played pretty decent team defense, and that's, saying a lot for Bertans. But individually, we still have to deal with his struggles. But like I said, team defensive wise, I felt like he really picked it up. But what do you think of those two guys?
Yeah, no, I thought Davis played really good team defense, as you alluded to. He still got beat a few times when having to guard guys one-on-one, especially when he got switched on the guards, which is to be expected. But he made some really timely threes, like some really deep and tough threes. Like one, I think, was kind of at the left wing at the end of the shot clock. So he made some huge shots in only 8 minutes. Game dependent, I'd like to even see him get a little more run. He was playing in those two big lineups with Christian Wood and Maxi. And, despite just sort of the defensive deficiencies that kind of persist between Wood and Bertans at face value, there's just a lot of the size on the floor at that time, because you have three guys over 6'10", and the Mavericks, I thought, were doing, they were able to win some 50-50 balls and some rebounds they wouldn't typically get in those scenarios. So that was good to see. from Davis's perspective, Justin Holiday came in there. He surprisingly is not as limited offensively as I think a lot of us think. He attacked off a closeout and sort of, synced into a mid-range jump shot, which was nice. And, he played really good defense tonight rotationally, just as a team defender. He's always, since he's got here, I've talked about how good he is rotationally. He had 2 steals and 2 blocks, just does a really good job closing out and filling in the gaps, especially when, you get into those high intensity scramble situations where you're trying to rotate and replace. He was a huge part of that tonight. So those guys were huge contributors, even though they only accounted for 24 minutes total. Lastly, obviously, what did you think of how Christian Wood played tonight? First off, what did you think of Jason Kidd's decision to play him 34 minutes after that Spurs game? He's not starting, of course, but he still got the most minutes out of any Maverick big tonight. And despite, going 5 for 15 and having some shot making woes down the stretch, especially kind of after he got hit in the eye by Wenyen Gabriel in that one position, he ended up with 4 steals, 1 block, 9 rebounds and 8 assists, which I did not even see. That might be
4 steals. I don't know if you mentioned
I saw that. I just said that. Yeah. But just a sort of very interesting jack of all trades game from him. What do we see from this one? And just kind of speak to the full game sequentially from him, because I think that you can kind of break his game down to different parts.
Yeah, I think like you said it best, a jack of all trades sort of game out of him. Having Maxi back, to kind of, I guess, give a backstory, having Maxi back, creates this sort of 2 big lineup that you can run with. And I know Jason Kidd feels much more comfortable running that lineup with Christian Wood on the floor. And that's exactly what happened. I feel like Christian Wood was the main benefactor of having those sort of 2 big lineups. It freed up, his play, and he definitely got some more minutes playing and doing so. And as I said, it freed up all aspects of his game. Defensively, he doesn't have to, be a cog in the middle where we've seen him sort of really become a lackluster defender at times. He's able to freelance, able to get some weak side moves. And, even still, he's caught up in some bad defensive rotations, but it's not, as much of a black hole as it has been at times this year. And offensively, I felt like offensively is where we really felt his game to a true T in tonight's game. But 5 of 15, not super efficient, but I felt like this was more of a game where you had to watch it to really feel it. As you mentioned, he had 9 rebounds and 8 assists in this one. He just did a really good job of moving the ball and did a really good job of, creating second chance points for himself, whether it was through, pump fakes, down low, whatever it was. He got to the foul line. He actually didn't get to the foul line quite a bit, or he didn't get foul line at all. My bad. I felt like he got fouled.
He got fouled a ton. Yeah. I see why you said that, because there were a ton of times where he got contact and there was virtually no call.
Yeah.
There are some times where he's a little complaint heavy and is a little lackluster in terms of getting back on defense. It's not Luka level, but he does the whole flailing his arms thing like this. But I didn't think that was an issue at all tonight. He didn't seem like it obstructed his defensive game, but he was being really aggressive, and that 5 for 15 field goal stat is, I don't know. I think it's a little bit misleading in terms of how he played tonight. He was doing just a really good job. Like at the top of the key, he was distributing to Maverick cutters, which was really interesting when they, when any of the wings cut, he was able to get them a few ones with Kyrie and Josh. He pushed the ball in transition up the floor. It was almost like Kevin Love-esque with some of those passes he was doing tonight. 8 assists, and he was just doing a really good job rotating and replacing as a team defense. Like that's kind of where we always talk about where he's probably the worst, as we talk about, him usually being a better individual defender than Powell, but less of a team defender. And, he did have some woes individually at first, but I think he remediated that fairly quickly. And he sort of was able to mend what he was doing on that end. I mean, admittedly, he was guarding Wenyen Gabriel most of the time, so it's not like we're talking about the hardest matchup in the world. But other than that, when the Mavericks were in those, scramble situations, I mean, he did a really good job just filling the gaps and picking off passing lanes. And he got a block too in this one. We saw how he can affect the game without having to be an integral part of the offensive flow. I mean, yes, he did take the second most shots on the team tonight. And, he was still part of the offensive flow, of course, but he missed quite a few shots tonight, and it didn't seem at any single time as if it was severely costing the Mavericks because of what else he was providing. And I don't really think that we've seen him do this many different things in a game this year, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think that, like, if you're looking at it in terms of that, like on the stat book, I don't think we've seen him get this close to a triple double. I don't even know. This might be an assist high for the season.
Maybe a career high. I'll have to look it up, but
either way, an amazing all around game from Christian Wood. Yes, he had his, troubles defensively at times, but even still, he had a really good defensive game, in my opinion.
Yeah. After the first.
Let me tell you, after the first quarter. But yeah, Christian Wood.
That was a career high in assists for him, by the way. Tonight.
It was. Wow.
Yeah.
Or did it tie it, or was it? It was a career high.
Yeah. Maybe it tied it. No, 7. He's hit 7 assists twice. And funny enough, it was actually against the Lakers on Christmas Day, the last time when he had 7 assists. Funny. So this was a career high for him, 8 assists.
Well, shout out to Christian Wood. It's a career night for the Mavericks. I mean, Maxi Kleber hits a buzzer beater, and Christian Wood gets a career high. So.
Speaking of Maxi Kleber, is the last guy we'll get into. I mean, we talked about the buzzer beater, so I don't think there's any more.
Was this his best game since injury? Since coming?
No, 100%. I mean, I thought Maxi did a really good job defending the rim in this one. When he was asked to, he did a really good job of sitting home in that dunker spot on defense, just doing a really good job rotating on Anthony Davis. He played really good at one-on-one defense on him. You can definitely tell he's still kind of getting into the flow of things athletically. He's still maybe a little bit of a step behind, but he's staying savvy. He's staying stout on a lot of these defensive possessions. And I think he played a little bit better on that end than the Spurs game the other night. Still a few times where he got beat off the dribble, but other than that, I mean, he attacked off a closeout, made a and one, and that was a really key play, and he made the free throw. He stayed poised throughout this one, and he was able to knock down some free throws too. So obviously, a big game from him, not just because of the buzzer beater, but because of how he contributed defensively and how well, even an injury hampered Maxi Kleber, who is maybe even lost a step, is working well in a too big lineup with the Mavericks defensively. I'd be interested to look at the defensive metrics, but the Mavericks wasn't their best defensive game in the world. And if this isn't the Lakers, yes, they probably lose from the perspective that not a lot of other teams are going to shoot that poorly. But it still, was like they patched a lot of the holes that we've seen in some of these previous games. Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. Bringing this back to Maxi, we definitely felt where I guess his hamstring injury has sort of hampered him. We saw his athleticism, of course, drop off a bit, and we've seen that, but I don't know why. I feel like at times this game, it was kind of more so on a spotlight than other times. But even still, he's able to get it done. He, of course, hit the last 6 points of the Mavericks had in the game, but I mean, I felt like it was his best game overall. Yes, he's still coming into form defensively, but even still, I thought he, did a good job recovering at times because there was a sort of, few minute span there in the fourth quarter where the Lakers were getting really easy shots down low, just sort of, off of dump offs in the dunker spot. And, he sort of picked up on that pretty quickly. Yes, he picked up some fouls, but you kind of have to do so in that scenario. And I felt like, he was really the main guy to pick up on that. And really the Mavericks defense recovered honestly well because of him. So I think he's, still coming into form, of course, still coming into the Maxi Kleber of old, but it definitely felt like, he's still coming back. And it also felt like, at times, I'm not going to say it, but it felt like at times that he was back, and definitely hitting that buzzer beater, I think is going to increase his confidence tremendously. So I'm excited to see what happens from here on out, but definitely his best game, in my opinion, or at least since the injury. No, 100%. Were there any guys that you wanted to highlight from a Lakers perspective, Jaren, in terms of maybe you were surprised by how they played, or you just wanted to add on to what we've already talked about? If there were any guys that you felt like we missed in this one, because, we obviously talked about them a little bit throughout the flow of the podcast, but admittedly we probably missed a few things. Yeah, I mean, a guy that I felt like we talked about heavily, at least in the last Lakers podcast, was Jared Vanderbilt. I'm thankful we didn't have to talk about him too much in this one. He didn't have too much of a stamp on this game, one where, his sort of defensive
tenure or defensive
prowess.
Prowess just wasn't, as it wasn't as effective in this game. One where the Mavericks were able to sort of put him to bed. Yes, he got some easy shots.
I mean, I
down
think a
low,
lot of it too was, if we're just looking at size comparatively, like they probably want to throw, a little bit of a smaller guy. We saw a lot of more like Troy Brown Jr. and Malik Beasley and guards try to guard Kyrie versus, Vanderbilt was sort of pestering Luka and stuff like that. And it's just more, he's 6'9", despite how good of a defender he is one-on-one. I think that they just maybe opted to stick him on some other guys and not just because of the speed factor with Kyrie, and that probably mitigated some of his effects, but I don't think he played bad. I thought Rui Hachimura, he had some good shots off the bench in the mid range, but it's weird because he just doesn't feel as if he has like that marginal of an effect on the game at times.
No,
they didn't play him a ton though, which was, I thought Wenyen Gabriel, he played okay. He did a good job on the glass, but you could definitely tell that he got bullied at times in this game with his lack of size. But, he also didn't do terrible on Christian Wood. I thought that he tried as hard as he could have defensively, and he honestly was able to lead some of Christian Wood's shots astray. Austin Reeves, he's good at pushing the ball in transition, as much as I hate the, fake beef with him and Josh Green. And he's a kid who's really good at operating in the pick and roll, savvy offensive player. He has definitely has his downfalls defensively though. I thought Schroeder actually had a damn good game.
Yeah, I thought he might have had the best game of, maybe not Anthony Davis.
Besides Anthony Davis, yeah. He was just doing a really good job getting downhill in the pick and roll. You could definitely tell that his speed was something that the Mavericks definitely didn't have a 1-for-1 counter for. Maybe barring Josh Green, of course, has the lateral quickness to kind of derail a guy like that, but a lot of the time he was having to guard bigger guys when he was in there. And Schroeder, he was just doing a really good job. Facilitating like last minute in the pick and roll. He had a few lobs to AD that were just very timely. I thought Beasley did a good job. He didn't make any threes tonight, but he pushed the ball in transition as well. Got downhill in a few possessions. Troy Brown Jr., he made 2 threes, and that was that.
About it.
He's the sort of he's the ultimate sort of 1-for-1 comp to a 3-and-D guy, if you're thinking about that. Maybe not as much as the D of the D as you would like. That sounded really wrong, but nonetheless, and I thought D'Lo, it was weird looking that he went 5 for 17 after the game, as I kind of alluded to early in the podcast, because he felt like he was hitting some really tough shots at times in this one, and he was, but clearly, it was sort of mitigated by a lot of the tough shots that he was missing. So, but he did a really good, he's a really good ball mover. I think that's very underrated about him. He just does a good job setting and synchronizing the offense. And I think that's very underrated considering.
He had 11 assists in this game.
That's what I was saying. But, the Timberwolves traded for Mike Conley, and that was their whole kind of reason, was to get a guy who is a little more just poised and not as shot heavy. But it didn't seem as if D'Angelo really obstructed from the offense at all. And in fact, I think he added to it despite not having the best shooting game. I don't know if that was more of a sort of Conley Gobert rekindling thing that that front office was doing, but that was interesting. And I thought AD, he played a hell of a game. You would have liked, from a Lakers perspective, probably to see him try and look for his own shot a little more, or take lead of the offense more in that fourth quarter, go to him one-on-one a little bit more. But in the flow of the offense, he had a lot of, good possessions in the pick and roll, was giving the Mavericks issues. And it almost honestly felt like the Mavericks kind of caught a break with how much more dominant he could have been in this game. And the Lakers kind of just, I don't know, for whatever reason, they didn't go to him. He went 9 for 14 tonight. He wasn't even the leading shot taker on the Lakers. Do you think that the Mavericks could have had some more issues persist had AD had not a bigger role, but, had the Lakers looked him more on offense in this one? Because, I thought defensively, he obviously he posed a pretty huge threat to the Mavericks at the rim. You could definitely tell that affected some of their decision making at times.
Yeah, I for sure, I would confidently say that yes, that would definitely change things. But even still, like the Lakers as a whole, I don't know what their sort of points in the paint stat would be, or like how many points in the paint they had, but I still feel like majority of what they scored was inside the paint. Now, had most of those points been Anthony Davis, I feel like that we'd be having a different conversation, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast. But definitely, one of his sort of better games, but one game or a game where, at times it just didn't really feel like he was too present.
Lakers had 54 points in the paint.
Yeah, so
Mavericks had 42.
Almost half their points came via paint. But definitely, as I mentioned before, one where at times it didn't feel like Anthony Davis had his fingerprints in the game. But when it did matter most, they did go to Anthony Davis. And I think if you're a Laker fan or, whatever, if you're trying to critique the Lakers in this instance, you probably go to him more, just, with what he can do, of course. And, sort of
in the same sort of vein that the Mavericks went to Kyrie when they really needed.
Yeah, like the Mavericks, they relied on Kyrie, and we've seen that at times they have to rely on Luka. But yeah, the Lakers, they sort of, I guess, deferred from going to Anthony Davis. I don't really know what the best reason is or why, but I felt like at times, they just had to kind of defer from that. They went to Troy Brown at times. Of course, D'Angelo Russell, he put up 17 shots, I think. But I feel like had they relied on him heavily, it would probably be having a different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, to say that this wasn't a, kind of lucky win for the Mavericks would definitely be a fallacy. They definitely escaped a little bit, and I'm not taking a whole lot of credence to the fact that this was a cure-all to any of the woes that, like, we're not sitting here saying that this Mavericks team is completely different just because of this great win, but it's a huge momentum play, and it's very exciting as the Mavericks get Luka back, and it's much needed as the playoff race ensues. And issues still could persist. The Mavericks could still be in the play-in. Hell, they could still be out. But this was a huge game from the perspective of wanting to make the playoffs and putting yourself in that position. And Kyrie to go out there on the sore foot and everything and do what he did tonight. It was a hell of a game. And I mean, shout out to Maxi Kleber in Würzburg, Germany. It was the Würzburg wonder kid.
You want the most ESPN stat that I can think of in my deep dark.
Who is Dirk Nowitzki?
Who is Dirk Nowitzki?
Okay. Go ahead.
No, but mentioning Dirk, that was the last German to hit a buzzer beater on the Mavericks. I told you that before we press recorded, and that's the most ESPN stat I can pull out of my head. So
as Jaren wanted to find the most specific niche in terms of any stat that he could think of. So we'll leave you guys with that. It was a really fun one though, and we are excited to be back Monday night after the Mavericks play the Grizzlies, who will be without Ja Morant. Despite him being able to return to action, he will still be in the process of revamping after going to a rehabilitation center in Florida. So hopefully he is steadfast in his recovery and all is well.
He'll find a way to make a presence on the
Ja and his mental health.
Are we going to lose?
Or maybe T. Morant.
Oh yeah, T. Morant.
Yeah. More so than anything. But it was still really fun night. And I hope Luka comes back soon, man, because I posed the question on Twitter: how much more games can the Mavericks persist without Luka or Kyrie? I mean, I don't know what they're going to do in terms of Kyrie's injury management, but it seems as if he's fully back. And I mean, we're here, man. 11 games till the playoffs, if the Mavericks make the playoffs, or they could be in the draft lottery. But I mean, after this one, the playoffs seem ever more likely, and we'll see how it will operate, how it goes game by game. Nothing's a certainty. But I mean, what a huge clutch time victory, and just an overall very exciting aura around the team right now, Jaren.
I feel great. I feel amazing. The vibes are.
They are ejaculating.
Yeah,
Well, we will censor that for everybody because we cannot say the I word because of Mr. Jalen Brunson leaving. But nonetheless, I think we'll wrap it up with that. Make sure to follow us and give us a 5-star rating and tell us what you like or don't like. If you guys feel so inclined, you can do so on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. We are almost on any podcast platforms, and we really appreciate your guys' feedback from that perspective, and any follows or downloads you guys give us, of course, is much appreciated. If you guys are listening on YouTube, shout out to the YouTube gang. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. What will T. Morant's stat line be Monday night when the Mavericks play the Grizzlies? That was a good one. They've been kind of bad recently, but I think that was a good one. Other than that, make sure to follow us on Twitter at mainstream_Mavs, where you guys can get all our updates surrounding the Mavericks and our thoughts on everything. The outside the box score.
Yeah,
just the main box, just the main podcast.
Beautiful thoughts.
Yes, you can get it all there. Follow our personal Twitters too. We don't really plug those often, but you can follow Jaren.
I'm posting a little more every day.
Yes, so. Jaren _Mavericks, and me at Will Mill J. no spaces. But besides, I don't think you can do spaces. But besides that, we will catch you guys in the next one. Maxi Kleber wins it for the Mavericks.